The Ben Johnson era kicked off in Chicago, and it did not go the way we all wanted it to. But at the same time, the sky is not falling. A huge crevasse did not open up underneath Soldier Field and swallow the stadium whole. There's reasons for hope, and we'll get into them next on Bear Era. Welcome back to Bear Era, fans. The beginning of the Ben Johnson era is here, and it landed with a little bit less than a thud. And we'll talk about that, but we're also here to tell you that it's not as bad as you think, and there's lots of reasons why. But in the meantime, Ciaran, new season, and the NFL kicked off with a pretty good weekend outside of the Bears game. How you feeling?
Cue a video of "We suck again."
Major Leagues.
Yeah, it was not what we all hoped for, but kind of expected, because I was going into this game a little bit fearful on how it was going to look, and then maybe that first drive and the first couple of defensive series lulled me into a false sense of security, thinking that this is going well. And then you get through the third quarter. Hasn't been the most perfect game, but you're like, we're still up, and you're driving to potentially get another touchdown, and you're thinking, oh, if we score here, that could be it. And then what happened. So we'll get into it, but it was, I think, disappointing is probably the main emotion that I had after the game.
Yeah, that's for sure. It didn't feel good during it. It did feel very familiar. You mentioned that, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But welcome to all the new fans to Bear Era. We'll have good news this year. We'll have bad news this year. Sorry that the first week didn't bring us a bigger bounty of good news, that's for sure. But we will get into it. So the show is laid out pretty much like it was last year. We will go through top trio, which is 3 points, usually one from me, one from Ciaran, and a fan question of the week. We decided against a fan question of the week this week. We'll open it up next week and give you plenty of time to submit your questions. And of course, if your question is chosen, you'll get a sticker from us. We've also got a couple of new sections in the pod this year. We're going to have a stat of the week or a highlight play of the week that we really liked. We're also going to have a new section we're really excited about called North Watch. We'll get to that in a little bit. Mike on the mic is back as always, and that'll be our show every week. So let's kick it off with top trio and get into our top thoughts from week 1 in the NFL.
I'm going to start here, and no, I'm not going to go, the moon is falling, everything looks terrible. I'm going to go off something that I was concerned about heading into training camp and then heading into the season, where when we spoke about what we needed to fix on the roster, and my biggest key was the problem that Caleb had last year is there wasn't a running game to support him and make things easier, and unfortunately there wasn't a lot of change there. The fact that DeAndre Swift was still your main feature back was worrisome for me, because I went and looked at what Ben Johnson likes to do on how he likes to call his running game and how it helps the passing game, because that's kind of what his main philosophy is there. And I looked at what he did in Detroit when he had Jahmyr Gibbs, obviously, but even before that, when he had Jamal Williams scoring those like 12 or 13 touchdowns that one year. And I looked at Swift, and it didn't really fit. And we can kind of see that as well. So I went back to some of my notes to see really where it goes wrong and what they do need to fix. Obviously, the first thing I mentioned, he uses the run to set up the pass. It's not like he doesn't want to run the ball 30 times a game, and you could see that very clearly. It's probably going to average about 15 or 16 times a game. But what it should do is, if you have success, it should open up the passing game and make things a lot easier for the quarterback. Yesterday, all we saw was Caleb Williams early on had success in the rushing attack. And what happened then in was it the second or third drive, Minnesota actually had to keep a spy in there, and you saw some more plays open up. That's what should happen when one Caleb has that athleticism, but also if your running game is working, it opens up other plays on the passing game. And unfortunately, DeAndre Swift, we said it last year, great in space, but in terms of what Ben Johnson wants to do, like your outside zone, and then sometimes kind of between the tackles, he doesn't have the vision to be able to find the hole. There was one or two times in those first couple of drives. There was one in particular where a hole opened up pretty big as well, on the outside where Colston Loveland, I think, was blocking at the time, and he just completely misses it and he runs into his own offensive lineman. There was a time when an offensive lineman ended up behind him. Um, so it's those type of things that were worrisome, but also Ben likes to use motion and misdirection. We saw that. That's the reason we had a lot of pre-snap penalties. Hopefully that does fix up. But the key thing here is that you're able to use that running game to then open things up and play action. But that can't happen if your running game doesn't work. And we saw last year it didn't work for the vast majority of the season. And it did affect the way Caleb was able to play. And then unfortunately today or yesterday, again, it didn't work. And it puts the quarterback in a situation to where the defense can just pin their ears back and go after him because they know the running game's going nowhere. And that just can't happen. The other things that I kind of pointed out when we were talking about this months ago was that Ben Johnson likes to have a versatile backline where we saw it obviously Jahmyr Gibbs and Dave Montgomery. Even when Swift was there, I mentioned Jamal Williams was kind of the 1B. When you look at it right now, obviously Roshan is injured. Maybe this changes when he comes back into the fray, but like you see Kyle Monangai and DeAndre Swift, there's not a big deviation on what those two guys do. And Monangai doesn't get the ball enough to be able to really give that like a 1-2 punch. And that's what's worrisome. The only thing that fits for me is what he likes to do with the running game in the red zone. But it doesn't fit DeAndre Swift if it's Roshan Johnson. So when I'm looking at all these different facets, when you go and you examine what he wanted in the running game from his teams in Detroit, there's really only one or two facets that fit, and they don't fit our starting running back. You're going to come up against Detroit that are going to look at that again. They're going to be like, we stopped the run, then we can put pressure on Caleb, and every team's going to do that. So you need to be able to come up with something to get that running game going. If I always see it as if you can't get that running game going, it's very hard to have a legitimate offense in the NFL because if you're one dimensional, it doesn't matter how good your quarterback is. If you can't run the ball, you're in trouble.
Absolutely true. And the running game did struggle in the first half for both teams. The Bears are very good against the Vikings running game. They didn't establish it. JJ McCarthy showed the effects of that early on. And then when he got comfortable later on, it was when the Vikings were able to open up their running game. So it's just another example. And the Bears, they have multiple problems with the running game. The offensive line didn't play well as a unit last night. 3/5 of the offensive line played okay. Jonah Jackson really struggled. Braxton Jones is still coming back to strength. He had an okay game, but not a great game, and certainly not a good game in the run game for the most part. So if your offensive line isn't blocking it up, and there's not holes, DeAndre Swift is not the kind of running back that is going to pay that off. There are running backs in the NFL that can do that. The Bears don't have one on the roster right now, so they need the offensive line to work better if Swift is going to work. And when the offensive line does work better, he is a functional NFL running back, and he will get you the occasional highlight play. But if 3 is blocked, he'll get you 3, not 5. And that is a big deal. It's not exciting. It's not sexy. But if you get 5 yards on first down, your playbook looks very different than if you get 3 yards on first down with a run. So Bears have a bunch of things to clean up. You mentioned pre-snap penalties. Those are going to drive Ben absolutely bonkers. He is not the kind of coach that's going to put up with that. He mentioned it almost first thing in the press conference afterwards. And, it's been a point of emphasis. Got to figure out what the reason for that is, whether it's the line understanding the cadence or it's just guys jumping, not understanding when they're supposed to go. That's not the kind of thing you want to see persist into week one. It did, and it was a big deal. Those are penalties you can control. There were penalties the Bears couldn't control, but pre-snap penalties for the most part, illegal shifts, jumping off sides, all that stuff, not great. False starts are going to drive Ben to the nut house, I swear. So I imagine we'll see a point of emphasis, but the running game does need to get cleaned up, and it is both a talent infusion at the running back position. Hopefully Roschon comes back healthy this year, and we get to see his contribution. Both you and I are excited about what he can offer this offense if he's on the field, but he's got to be on the field. And the offensive line just has to play better in general, not only in the run game, but also in the passing game. And they still look like they were figuring it out, coming together as a unit, passing off stunts. There were some very basic things that didn't go as well as we hoped it would. It's not just about talent. It's about talent and those five guys playing together. So it was not a terrible performance, but it was certainly not a highlight performance from the offensive line. And they've got to get better if this offense is going to take off. That leads me into my point, which is the reaction to how Caleb Williams played. Now, I'll say at the top, Caleb Williams did not play a great game. Caleb Williams also did not play a terrible game. And by the reaction, you would think he murdered somebody in the street outside Soldier Field at halftime. People are ready to draft another quarterback this morning. And that is strange to me. I understand that there's a lot of frustration, and I think it's because there was a lot of buildup and everybody assumed that Caleb was going to be good right away. And he was decent. He was not great. He missed open throws. He turned down bigger throws for smaller ones. In the second half, we started to see him regress, and he got his eyes down. He ran more quickly from the pocket. A lot of things that we saw last year. Despite that, he was not terrible. He didn't throw a pick six. He didn't throw two. He didn't throw any interceptions, as a matter of fact. And just for turning down opportunities, you would think that he should be burned at the stake based on the reactions. And I think it's all this pent-up energy about Ben Johnson coming to town. But like Jared Goff didn't turn into Jared Goff. It took him years and a team change until he became who he is. And oh yeah, by the way, Mr. Goff, how did he play this weekend against a very tough Green Bay defense? Not great. He threw for 225 yards. Caleb threw for 210. His yards per attempt, Mr. Goff's 5.8. Caleb, 6. Completion percentage was a lot higher, 79.5 for Goff, only 60 for Caleb, which is 10 points below what Ben has said the stated goal is of 70. They both threw for one touchdown, but Goff threw a pick. His rating was 88.6. Caleb's was 86.6, literally 2 points below. Goff had one throw of 20-plus yards. Caleb had 3. Like, nobody's talking about running Jared Goff out of Detroit, and obviously he has accomplished so much more in his professional career than Caleb Williams has, but you don't hear the hue and cry of like, oh, well, we're not going anywhere until we get rid of that Goff guy. I get it, it's different for a rookie, but the expectation built up so completely that people are ready to throw the baby out with the bathwater, and I just don't think that's necessary. 1, it's week 1. 2, Caleb is a sophomore quarterback in the NFL on his 4th offensive coordinator. I'm going to put up a little graphic on screen of Caleb and quarterback X and quarterback X's first year of full-time starting in the NFL. And you're going to see that Caleb leads in almost every category with his performance last year. Almost every single one, except for the other quarterback was only sacked 24 times, which is almost exactly 1/3 of the amount of times Caleb was sacked. And despite that, Caleb still had a better rating, better yards per game, better adjusted yards per attempt, more first downs, more touchdowns, less interceptions by far, a better completion percentage. That quarterback was Drew Brees. Like, let's go easy on Caleb Williams. He has an immense amount of talent. He has not figured it out yet. He is still learning things, and we are all frustrated that the results are not immediate. But somebody said something on Sunday that made a lot of sense to me, which is we all want microwave success. We all want to put it in, push the button, have it ding a minute and a half later, and be good. And that's not the way quarterbacking in the NFL works. So give Caleb Williams a little breathing room. He played an average game, was not great, could have been a lot better for sure, but it was not as terrible as people are making it out to be.
Yeah, I always say, even if you want to talk quarterbacks or any other position, development is not linear. Like, you don't just suddenly get better every single game. Sometimes things happen. You have to learn things. I think it was Kurt Warner was saying it today as well, it, I think it was Kurt Warner, where they were talking about him as this is the first time he's ever going to be taking snaps under center for a very long time because he didn't do much of it in college. So he's having to do that. That changes your footwork as well. He's We heard on the broadcast that he's been changing his cadence from what he had last year. So that's another new thing that he's trying to do. He's also putting into place a completely new offense. You mentioned it, having four offensive coordinators in the space of 18 games. Like, that's not a recipe for success. Like, what I don't like is, yeah, he had some really bad throws yesterday where needed to make them and he didn't. And he has to take ownership of that. But the same people that are trying to drive him out of town are the same people that will say that Drake May had an amazing game yesterday when he didn't. Or 2 days ago, he was okay, but had a couple of boneheaded throws that one was picked off. Both had very similar games, but if you ask the same people, they'll say Drake May had an amazing game and Caleb Williams was absolutely terrible, when realistically they're fairly the same in terms of how they played. And that's where I think people need to calm down, because especially if you want to talk for both of those guys, they're both going into a new system. They both have new head coaches, and it's going to take time. Not everybody is going to really fit a system straight away like Jaden Daniels did with the Washington Commanders, and has been able to now be with the same coaches for 2 years now. Well, this is the second year, but you have to give Caleb a little bit of slack here. Like, it's the first game. If you expected things to go 180 in one game for a team that was absolutely terrible last year just because you have a new head coach, that it's not the way it works. Things can change when you have a really, really talented football team and they just hated the head coach from the previous year and they just didn't want to play for them. And you could say that there'd be certain players that could have felt that way towards Eberflus, but this wasn't a perfect roster. This wasn't a roster ready to win. That's why when we spoke about this, even during the offseason, we're like, they might be able to compete for a wild card, but like, none of us were talking about them actually competing to win this division, because we knew where this roster was. There was still glaring holes that needed to be fixed, and they're not fixed yet. And ultimately, that's what's going to cost you if you don't have a roster that is perfect or close to that point. When you give away silly penalties that push you back when you're driving up the field, if you don't have that cohesion on offense or defense, you can't overcome that. And unfortunately, the Bears don't have a team right now that can overcome those mistakes. It may come by week 10, 11, 12, 13, where they've played together for longer under this coaching staff. You might see a more cohesive function on offense or on defense for the entirety of the game. But that was never going to happen in week one. The fact that they were winning and should have won this game when you were looking at the end of the third quarter, despite the way they had played at times, like, that was a positive. But unfortunately, what happens is if you keep making mistakes and allowing a team into the game like Minnesota, who won 14 games last year, let's not forget that, like, you're asking for trouble. I think everybody probably felt it throughout the game that
I did.
You have a chance to win here, but you're not stepping on their throat when you have that opportunity. And if you let good teams stick around, they'll find a way to win. And that's what the Minnesota Vikings did.
Absolutely. We let them hang around, and that's what happened. They found their opportunity. Credit to the Vikings, certainly to KOC and to JJ McCarthy, who rallied. He had a terrible first half. If you want to talk about terrible quarterback play, JJ's first half was a nightmare for a young starter on the road against a division rival. Pick six, shook it off, and came back, made plays in the third and fourth quarter, and won the game. That is a real positive for him. But if you look at his first half performance, it was really bad. It was a tale of two halves for him. Again, once the running game picked up, KOC made some adjustments. They started to get the Bears on their heels on defense by the end of the third quarter, and sure enough, the big fourth quarter comes, and the Vikings roll out with a victory. We are going to talk about some positives for the Bears because there were a lot lost in the loss, and Dennis Allen's defense was a revelation in the first half. They created pressure with four. They were incredibly tough against the run. They played with energy. Again, the aforementioned pick six from Nashawn Wright. Guys like Noah Sewell, folks who are new to the Bears like Dayo Dengbo had a tremendous half. He was effective against both the run and the pass. Javon Dexter looks like he's taking the step that we all hoped he would. This is a defense with the Bears down two of their best players. Kyler Gordon and Jalen Johnson didn't play. It's a tremendous performance that I'm sorry it didn't get paid off for the defense. This is a story as old as time in Chicago. The defense plays really well. Don't get a victory. But again, you've got to play the game for four quarters. The Bears won the first half without question. They didn't win the second half, and therefore they didn't win the game. And that's a shame, but again, the effort from guys like Dio and Javon and Nashawn Wright, Sewell, Montez Sweat got into the act. Like, the defense looked charged up and ready to go. And that's not atypical. Defenses are usually ahead of offenses at this time in the NFL season, but it shouldn't be overlooked that the defense is not going to be a pushover this year, especially when they get their best players back. This is already a team playing at a high level, and I think that's worth noting.
Yeah, especially when you're coming up against a team that has Justin Jefferson out there, when you have a TJ Hawkinson out there. Obviously, Adam Thielen was coming back, but they have a good rushing attack as well. Aaron Jones. Obviously, there was a quote-unquote rookie quarterback, second-year guy, but first ever start for when we're talking about JJ McCarthy. But again, up until middle way through that third quarter, their biggest play was a defensive pass interference. And again, to a point is you can't allow that to happen. Even though it was a potential 50-50 call based on where the ball was, you still got to get your head around and make sure that you're looking at the football, and that is a mistake. But again, even though that happens, you didn't give up 7. You only gave up a field goal there, and you were able to limit the Vikings for the most part. But unfortunately, when the offense was not able to maintain the football and go through long drives, the defense at some point was going to crack. When you don't have Jalen Johnson, when you don't have Kyler Gordon, there's going to be mistakes that are made. Obviously, in the fourth quarter, there's different plays that you can talk about. The PI and Stevenson, it seems like a lot of analysts have kind of put up there as well, of guys slipping and referees allowing the flags to go. But that happens. You get bad calls every game. It's going to happen. But you have to be able to kind of control it as best you can. And that's why you can't really complain too much about some of them. There was one or two that changed the momentum of the game, but you can't let that affect you. You can't let one bad call from a referee make you give up 21 points that are unanswered. That just can't happen. And it did. And the Bears have to prove that they have changed, that they won't let this completely derail them, because last year we saw it. They lost that game against the Commanders and it derailed their season. Don't let something like that, to where you should have won that football game, completely derail how you play in week 2, week 3, week 4. But look, I guess to look on the offensive side, I know there wasn't loads to be very happy about, but we even look at the starting point of that game, I thought when Caleb Williams was not under a lot of pressure in the pocket, his movement within the pocket was much better than we saw last year. And it allowed him to escape a couple of times and get the ball off a couple of times when his first and second reads were not there. We saw one to like Colston Loveland where I think it was like his third or fourth read on that play, but because of his pocket movement, he was able to move around and actually get the ball out. And that's where, if your offensive line in a couple of weeks' time are a cohesive unit and there's less pressure on him for a longer period in the game, you should see more successful throws and you should see the offense moving the ball better. So things like that I liked. Obviously, there was a lot of things that need to be fixed up, and that's just the case after week one. We could probably mention 6 or 7 football teams this past weekend that we expected way more from that looked terrible. And unfortunately, the Bears shouldn't have been in that situation when you are up by 2 or 3 scores heading into the final quarter. You should be able to manage that. Even if you give away a touchdown, you should still be able to manage it and come away with the victory. They didn't do that. And unfortunately, that's why you are 0-1. There's such a small divide between winning and losing. So unfortunately, the Bears didn't help themselves. They kind of kicked themselves while they were down, where they gave away way too many. We talked about it earlier. Pre-snap penalties killed the team. Like when you have over 100 yards in penalty yardage, it's your own fault why you didn't win the football game.
Yeah, for sure. And this isn't blaming officials because there are going to be bad calls. There are going to be calls that get missed every week. And the only way to insulate yourself against that is not to complain to the league office or send a video or anything else. It's to play well enough on offense that you generate enough points that you're ahead by 7. And maybe you give up a bad field goal because of a long PI that was not great. But it doesn't sink you because you insulated yourself. You played well enough on offense that you armored yourself up against those calls. If it gets down to those calls and that's the difference, hey, that's going to happen every week. That's out of your control. Playing on offense well enough that it isn't is in your control. And they didn't do that. On top of that, they made a lot of mental mistakes. So this isn't on the refs. The calls were not good. That's clear. That's not the reason they lost. The reason they lost is because they didn't execute and they didn't take care of the things that they could take care of, and they need to. And I think they can. These are fixable mistakes. We saw a good game from Roma Dunze, which was encouraging. We saw Zacchaeus come in and play what I think is the correct role in wide receiver 3 or 4. He was productive there. DeAndre Swift did have some good runs, showed very good effort, but again, the blocking has to be better for him to be highlighted and to make a difference from his position. We saw a bunch of the new offensive linemen have really good games. Again, if only one offensive lineman's having a really good game, your offensive line's not going to have a good game. So it does take us into the news section, stat of the week, and we're going to highlight that defensive effort because they were able to get pressure, which is a key to any defense, and they were able to do it largely without blitzing, which is a Dennis Allen staple. He does love his blitzes, but he also has plenty of downs where he only rushes with 4, and the Bears were able to generate pressure rushing with 4 only, and that was largely because of guys like Javon and Dio. And that is a huge, huge luxury for a defense. When you do not have to commit extra rushers to get pressure, things are going to go pretty well for your football team. They did rack up 4 sacks in this game. That's our stat of the week. They only reached 4 twice in a 17-game season last year, and it was against the Panthers and Jags, both in October. So they've already met that mark on the very first game against the Vikings. Yes, no Christian Darrisaw certainly helped, but again, injuries are going to be a factor throughout the NFL season, and they are going to come up against other teams who are down a starting tackle. And if they can take advantage of it in the same way, it will definitely be a bolster to their season. And with that, we've got a new section for you this year on Bear Era. We know the Bears will only do as well as they do in their own division, the NFC North. So we recruited a fan of each team that works in the industry to keep tabs on the Bears' foes for us. To keep tabs on the Vikings, we got Arif Hassan, the editor at Wide Left and podcaster at Norse Code. To stalk the Lions for us, we got Nick Baumgartner. You know Nick, he's been on the show before, senior writer at The Athletic, and also a draft analyst for them. And then we needed to get a favor from a Packers fan. Not a position we ever wanted to be in, but we had to choose one, so we chose the very best one we could. We got Tom Grossi, NFL Fan of the Year and host of the Packcast. These three will be with us all year, keeping tabs on the NFC North foes. For this week, we just asked them to introduce themselves, and did they ever? One of them went even a little further, because if it's the NFC North we're talking about, there will be trash talk involved.
Hey, Arif Hassan here from WideLeft.Football. Really excited to be the Vikings correspondent here, talk about my favorite team over the next 18 weeks, which I'm sure over time will become my least favorite team. But as of week 1, we've got a pretty fun team operating here. I have been covering the Vikings for about a decade and a half. I've also covered the NFL nationally for places like The Athletic, Pro Football Network, Bleacher Report, and a bunch of other spots. It doesn't really matter. But what you should know is I'm from Minnesota. I've been following this team since 2009 in a more in-depth way, and since 1998 in kind of a more tortured way, if that kind of helps. I hope that I'll be able to bring as much charisma as Tom Grossi, probably not, and as much knowledge as Nick will. So we'll see if I have the ability to do that. If not, I'm sure I'll be able to hear from all of you. Thanks for having me on. I'm going to have a ton of fun this year.
What's going on, guys? Nick Baumgartner here from The Athletic. I will be your Detroit Lions correspondent this season, as I used to cover the Lions here at The Athletic and still co-host a podcast with my guy Colton Pouncey, who is our current Detroit Lions beat writer at The Athletic. I am an NFL draft writer. I work a lot with Dane Brugler here year-round on the draft. I still do some stuff on the Lions occasionally. Still live here in Michigan, have lived here for most of my life. Grew up with the Lions. They're in my blood, and you can't get them out even when you might want to. So things have been good the last couple of years, as everyone knows, for the Lions. Obviously, Ben Johnson has moved on to Chicago, so congratulations to all Bears fans for that. And this division is suddenly very intense. It's been intense for the last several years. I think that could continue despite some rough starts out there in Lions land. Biggest thing right now is sort of twofold. Brand new offensive line interior. The identity of the team, they want it to stay the same. But you've got two rookie guards in Tate Ratledge, who's an actual rookie, Christian Mahogany, who's basically a first-time starter. And then with the retirement of Frank Ragnow before the season, huge deal, which is very underrated here. Graham Glasgow has moved over to center. Week 1 against Green Bay, that did not go so well. They need to get better inside. They did not run the ball as well as they'd like to, didn't pass protect as well as they'd like to, and frankly did not start the game well at all defensively. Played well in the last, I would say, probably 45 minutes of the game defensively, but just never got anything going on the offensive line in terms of push, in terms of the stuff that we're used to seeing from the Lions in this division against divisional foes. Kind of played the Packers exactly the same as they have in past games. Didn't work. Green Bay was awesome in this game. Micah Parsons is a problem for everybody in this division. So congrats to Green Bay on a great start. Micah is going to be amazing alongside Rashawn Gary. The Lions need to regroup. The Lions need to teach better up front on the offensive line, sort of reestablish some things, and probably just take a deep breath.
Hey folks, Tom Grossi here, representing the fandom of the Green Bay mother-loving Packers. Expectations this year? Well, before Micah Parsons, they were a playoff team. Maybe they can go on a run. But after, and especially after the Week 1 dominant win of the Detroit Lions, it is only Week 1, but perhaps the Super Bowl is in our future if the Eagles just go away. But this should be fun all season. Appreciate y'all. And even though everything changes in the NFL, there will always be one thing that remains the same. The Bears still suck.
Well, there you have it, Bears fans. We'll have all three correspondents with us all year, and we'll see, Tom. We'll see. With that, we roll into a more familiar face. Each week, we give our super producer, Mike Mercado, 90 seconds to give you his take on the Bears and what's happening with the team. So, as always, back by popular demand is Mike on the mic.
Thank you, EJ and Ciaran, and welcome in, Bears fans, to another edition of Mike on the Mic. And this season on Mike on the Mic, with me being right here in Chicago and speaking to you, the Bears fan, on a daily basis, we'll be looking at a key question, a concern, a storyline heading into that week's game. And this week, we are heading into Detroit after a really rough Monday night. Caleb Williams was inaccurate, missing open receivers. The O-line was sloppy, the running game was non-existent, the defense, while holding their own for most of the game and having J.J. McCarthy and the Minnesota Vikings offense on the ropes, gassed out at the very end. And Ben Johnson had some crucial calls that backfired and put the Bears in a disadvantaged position. And quite frankly, it was as disappointing a season opener than any other in recent memory. And I know a lot of that emotion from myself and Bears Nation comes from the hope, the optimism going into the season opener on Monday nights. But all those issues that we highlighted, everything that we saw that was negative coming out of that game can be fixed, can be worked on. Can they start that process this Sunday against the Detroit Lions, who themselves are looking for their first win in the season? And with a bonus for them, get to take out their frustration on their former offensive coordinator. We're going to learn really quickly how the Bears under Ben Johnson handle pressure, how Caleb Williams in his sophomore season handles scrutiny. To me, this feels like a game that is in desperate need for Caleb Williams to have a breakout performance. And that is what Bears fans who wants a little bit of a deeper look can keep an eye out heading into this game against Detroit. We'll see you next week on Mike on the Mic. I'm Mike Mercado. Now back to EJ and Ciaran.
With that, we're out of week one. Ciaran, any closing thoughts?
Don't freak out. It's week one. It happens. It's one game in a 17-game season. Ignore social media for a couple of days. Take a little break. Watch the Bear Era podcast and just chill out and enjoy it when it comes back around on Sunday against the Detroit Lions, because this season goes by very quickly. So don't get too annoyed. I always say don't get too high, don't get too low on the wins and the losses, and just kind of enjoy it as it goes, because the off season is long. Enjoy while the season is here.
Yeah, the off season is long and dark, and we are out of that. We are back to football, folks, and there will be brighter Sundays for the Bears this year under Ben Johnson. I can guarantee that, because last Monday was not super bright. I know there's better times ahead. How many? We'll see, but we'll be here the entire year chronicling everything that happens every week for the Bears. We've got some great guests lined up. Hope you like the new segments. Let us know in the comments, and of course, support our sponsors, Blue Wire Podcast and Homage Clothing. We'll have a link in the description. If you need any new Bears gear, there is no better provider of that than Homage. Super light, comfortable, long-lasting. Love the designs. We wear them here on the podcast, and if you want to help support us, please support them. With that, we will see you next week.